everyone.
Hello.
We made it. We're live.
We are live.
What?
Welcome to Mobilization Monday. Cassie and I are super excited to be back, and we are really excited to have this conversation with Chris Peterson and Karina Brown. Thank you everybody for your patience last week with our technical challenges. We appreciate you coming back and just hanging out with us for a little bit, getting to know these two. So really our intention here is just to give everybody an opportunity to know a little bit more about Chris and Karina, and for them to, speak to their beliefs, their strategies, their passions, give everybody an opportunity to get them know a little bit better. So we asked for questions, specific questions from the group, and we're thrilled to be able to ask them specifically to Chris and Karina. And I guess we should just get started. What do you say, Cassie?
Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds good. So like Heidi said, oh, sorry, did you start saying something, Heidi?
Nope.
Oh, okay, sorry. Heidi had said that this is Chris Peterson and Karina Brown. They're running for governor and lieutenant governor here in Utah. And we just wanted to start with each of you, if you guys can each take a second to explain why you're running for office, and then a little bit about the duties that you'll have when you take the office.
Shall I go first, or go ahead, Karina? Why don't you give it a shot, and then I'll go second.
Okay, well, thank you for the invitation to participate tonight. It's an honor to be on the ballot, especially because it was the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment this year. And I'm the first generation woman voter in my family because my mother is a Finnish immigrant. She didn't become a citizen until a couple years before she died. And then my father's mother, who lived in the States, my grandmother thought my grandpa should vote for her. So this is a pretty big deal. So I'm honored to be on the ballot with Chris Peterson. The duties of lieutenant governor include maintaining oversight over elections, campaign finance reform, document authentication, notaries, and municipal annexations, in addition to other duties, boards and commissions and things like that. And you can see that Lieutenant Governor Cox has taken on a wide variety of roles as lieutenant governor. I'm excited to potentially be the next lieutenant governor because elections and voting is so exciting to me. We saw Utah voters come together and pass ballot initiatives, propositions 2, 3, and 4 in 2018. And I was one of the 5 citizen sponsors of Proposition 3 to expand Medicaid. I was drawn into politics after my mother passed away in the healthcare coverage gap. So being able to participate in something that affects the lives of thousands of Utahns has been incredible, and seeing the teamwork and compassion of Utah voters coming together has been wonderful. So I know that the power of voting and civic engagement is amazing, and I'd like to work to help Utahns make their voices heard through voting and civic engagement as lieutenant governor. And I'm also was really excited to accept the invitation to be Chris's running mate, because when he announced his candidacy in March, I was impressed with his work as a consumer protection advocate and attorney, his work as a law professor, his work at the federal level, and he's honest, intelligent, and he's also compassionate. So I appreciate him and his willingness to run for governor. So thank you so much.
Great, thanks. Chris, do you want to go ahead and explain why you're doing it?
Sure. Well, thank you. First off, thank you, Heidi and Cassie, for the invitation to come on your podcast, or I guess, what do we call it? A video? So it's not a podcast because we're on a video. I don't know what the right word is. A vlogcast, in any event. And I also thank you so much, Karina, for being there, right there with me through this whole campaign. I decided to run for governor because I care about people. A little bit about my background. I grew up 5th generation Utahn. My great-great-grandfather led a wagon train of pioneers to Utah in 1847. He went on to become the public school superintendent, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, He was a Democrat back then, and was also the first chairman of Zion's Bank, and was a leader in the LDS Church. But I came from very modest, very humble origins. I was raised in a single parent family by my mom, and my mom was disabled, has a debilitating disease, multiple sclerosis. And so my earliest memories as a kid were pushing her in her wheelchair around the grocery store. I grew up in West Valley City, on the west side of Salt Lake. I got my first job when I was about 10 or 11, picking up trash at a strip mall along 3500 South, and worked my way through high school and then college at the University of Utah. I had a number of different odd jobs all the way through college. For a long time, I was a janitor, sweeping the halls at the biology building, at one of the biology buildings at the University of Utah. Eventually won a scholarship, a full ride scholarship to go to law school. And I decided at that point that I wanted my life to be about public service and mentoring and lifting people up and making the world a better place. I just didn't really care too much about making money, and turned down jobs to work at fancy law firms and banks. And instead, I worked for a judge for a year, and then went off to Washington, D.C. to try to lobby Congress to try to make our, in a nonprofit consumer rights organization, try to make our commercial rules more fair. Things like debt collection and high cost loans and mortgage loans, to make them more fair and reasonable and work better for families. When my wife and we met in law school, and after we got married, we had our first baby on the way. I decided I better get a little better paying job, and ended up being a law professor. Wrote a book, and I've won some awards, and I was teaching at the University of Florida. And eventually, after I started to do well, the University of Utah started recruiting me to come home. And my wife was like, you're going to take that job. And so we moved back to Salt Lake and have been here ever since, raising our family. But I did also work in the Obama administration after the 2008 financial crisis. I had been writing about problematic practices in the mortgage market, and had called out a major investment bank called Lehman Brothers that collapsed before that happened. And I was invited to go back and help set up the law enforcement agency within the new Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or the CFPB. That's the agency that's now charged with making sure our mortgage loans and credit cards and bank accounts and other types of loans are fair and transparent, and that they don't take advantage of us. I'm very proud that the team we set up returned about $12 billion in refunds and restitution to Americans who were taken advantage of by financial institutions that broke the law. That's about 10% of the adult population of America got a refund in one of the cases that we worked on. And I also have always had a soft spot in my heart for our active duty military service members and veterans. And I worked on a project to try to recognize that payday loan companies that make triple-digit interest rate loans, with loans averaging with interest rates of over 500%, had been clustering around military bases, trying to take advantage of the Marines and the soldiers. So I got a job at the Pentagon, the United States Department of Defense, and I was their lawyer that helped lead the project to try to make those loans illegal, which that's what the admirals and the generals all wanted, and negotiated on behalf of the Pentagon with the White House. And now I'm very proud to say that it's illegal to make a triple-digit payday loan to any soldier, sailor, Marine, or airman anywhere in America, including right here at Hill Air Force Base up up near Ogden. So it's a little bit about the kind of work that I've done over my career. I'm running for governor because I want to take those same set of skills, that my effort, my drive, my hard work, to try to make a difference in the daily lives of ordinary Utahns, to make sure they have access to affordable health care, to make sure that they're treated fairly in their work and their professional relationships, and to increase the funding and support we have for our public schools, to make sure that our children have the opportunities to get great paying jobs and a future for themselves. And also, I mean, increasingly, I know we're going to talk about this, but the coronavirus crisis, which is threatening all of that. So I'll stop there. That's a little bit about why I'm in this race. I just want to make a difference for ordinary working families in this state, just like I have throughout my entire career. Thanks so much.
Thanks, both of you. And do you guys want to try to go in, for those of us who, because a lot of us are still learning, we don't know a ton about politics, we just know we want to be voting for really great people. So can Chris, you go first, and then Karina, can you guys tell us what your primary role will be in office?
Well, the governor is the senior executive official of the state of Utah, and the job of the executive branch of government is to implement our laws. So the state legislature passes the laws, And then generally speaking, the governor is responsible for enforcing them and managing the different programs and whatnot. And the governor also has a role in helping shape and craft our budget priorities. The governor historically proposes a budget bill to the state legislature. Oftentimes the state legislature goes in different directions. But then at the end of the day, the governor also has the ability to veto legislation. And so if the legislature passes a law, the governor can say, no, that's not a workable law. It can veto it and send it back to the legislature. The legislature can override that veto with a large supermajority vote. So it's not a guarantee, but it does have significant play in shaping our laws and how they function. So there are a number of different administrative agencies that the governor is responsible for appointing the director of those agencies, as well as commissions and bureaus throughout the state legislature. One thing that the governor does not get to do is set policy for schools. That's governed by the school board, the state board, which are also elected officials as well, and have some independent say over that. But that's just a summary of some of the governor's role.
So the lieutenant governor, I'll go into it a little bit more. The lieutenant governor's statutory duties include the oversight of all notaries public, as I mentioned before, the legal authentication of documents, maintaining oversight and regulation of registered lobbyists, certifying municipal annexations, and serving as the keeper of the Great Seal of the state of Utah, in addition to maintaining oversight over elections. And so if we do win and I am lieutenant governor, I would like to explore expanded ranked choice voting, promoting the success of Utah's vote by mail system, researching secure and cost-conscious online voting for elections in the future, advocating for statewide election campaign finance reform, opening communication with county clerks, and protecting Utah's online voter registration database. But as I mentioned, also, I could have other roles as agreed upon, with Chris as the governor.
Great, thank you both so much. Heidi, did you want to go over the next one, or do you want me to?
You go ahead.
Okay, so from here, what are some of the ways that you think people can help the most with your campaign? We're in the last 9 days until election. So what things can the women of Nasty Women of Utah do to really help with the campaign at this point?
Yeah, so thank you. I hope that you will. There are a number of different things that you could do. So we are currently doing phone canvassing and text messaging or text banking, and we have a number of different events through several events where you can do it, and you can join a Zoom meeting and everybody does it together, or you can just reach out and we'll give you lists that you call, and we're calling thousands of people all across the state right now, trying to persuade them to give us a chance and vote for myself and for Karina, and we also need your positive word of mouth, and it's not too late for that. Positive word of mouth, talking to your friends and family, often can be one of the most effective strategies. It's hard to get people to do it, but it's very effective. And then also, you also feel free to. Social media is becoming increasingly powerful. You can reach a lot of people with your social media representations, and you're posting on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or sharing our posts, or potentially maybe pushing back and defending us a little bit, because we do get a lot of people kicking us online, and there are people that do turn to social media to try to make up their minds. That's part of how President Trump became so powerful, because his enormous Twitter following allows him to drown out things like newspapers and even television stations, and so we need supporters on social media as well. Karina, and you want to jump in here and add anything? I think maybe I don't know if I covered it all, but go ahead if you're interested.
I think you pretty much covered it, but the positive word of mouth, you can't buy that. So that is very valuable. If you like us as candidates and you support what we would want to do as governor and lieutenant governor, that is so valuable. So yeah, and everything Chris mentioned, that would be very helpful.
It's not too late to pick up a yard sign too, and that always helps as well. And if you're interested in joining our phone canvassing or text message canvassing, just go to petersonforutah.com, click on the volunteer link, and we'll try to get somebody in touch with you as soon as we can. We are coming right down to the end of it though, so we'll have to move fast.
Right. Yes. Thank you so much. So go to Peterson for Utah, right?
Yes. Yes.
.com. Was that right? Okay. PetersonforUtah.com so that you guys can sign up to, did you guys say canvassing or just phone banking?
Phone canvassing, I think, is what I said. I
Oh,
realized.
okay.
So we have made the decision. In fact, just earlier today, we issued a press release saying that we're going to stop in-person campaigning, just because, you know, we think that it's important to try to keep people safe and set a good example during the you know, our pandemic. And I'm sure we may talk about that later on. We may still do some things like put some door hangers up, but we're going to limit the traditional canvassing of door to door interaction with people. And some campaigns are making hard decisions about that. Some are knocking on the door and then backing away, you know, 10 or 15 feet. And we just felt like right now that for us, that was the best way to go, was to just be virtual and through electronic media.
Great. So our best way to help then is to do phone banking, to pick up a yard sign, and to talk as much as we can.
Social media. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That sounds good.
Can you tell us where exactly people can get a sign if they'd like to?
Yeah, you could. The easiest way for us is for you to go and you can either click one and ask for one for free, or you could go and buy one out of our campaign store, where you've got, you know, mugs and T-shirts and bumper stickers and things like that. And then we can mail them to you, or we also have some volunteers that are trying to deliver the yard signs. We are a little bit back. We had a bunch of press lately from an advertising campaign or some advertisements that Lieutenant Governor Cox and I did together. And so we're trying to get them all out there in the last week or so, but so we're doing the best we can to get the signs all around the state.
Is it possible for people to maybe volunteer to help distribute those?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If you want to do that, send us an email and we'll give you a stack of signs and to drive around town.
Yeah, there's been a couple of people we've seen that have been able to take signs around pretty much all of Utah. So yeah, we'll keep that in mind and see if anybody wants to sign up for that.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cassie.
Okay, so we are going to go to some specific questions that members of the group have asked us to ask you. So Cassie, why don't you take the first chunk and I'll take the next one.
Okay, that sounds good. So right now we had a lot of members of the group ask lots of questions, but we're going to kind of go over what you guys are planning to do for all of all of your constituents, because as we all know right now, it seems, well, all branches of government is run by Republicans here in Utah, and the divide is just massive. So between Democrats and Republicans, and oftentimes Democrats are feeling underrepresented. But how will you guys kind of bridge that gap to, to make sure that everybody's feeling like they're represented? Karina, do you want to do that one for us?
Sure. I live in Cache County with my husband and 4 children. My husband's a Republican and majority Republican area. So it's not like I live in Salt Lake where there's more active Democrats. So I'm kind of used to it. I've been able to develop some good relationships with the elected Republican officials over the last several years and work on some really cool projects. I ran for Utah House District 5 in 2018. And so I was able to interact even more with elected officials after I lost. So we've been able to do things like work on a women's suffrage committee together over the last several years with 2 members of Cache County Council who are Republican women, and that's been a great experience. Working as president of the Friends of the Cache County Children's Justice Center board, working on this new facility that was purchased with CARES Act money that the county purchased. And the Cache County attorney, James Swink, is an amazing person. And so I'm used to developing those relationships with people that are from different political parties. So that's what we would want to do as governor, as a lieutenant governor, is just building bridges with people, cultivating positive relationships and working on important projects and solving problems together.
Perfect. And then this is probably going to be the easiest question, at least I hope so. Do Black Lives Matter?
Yes, of course they do. And I think, how this has become, a flashpoint is troubling to me. I think it's important to just listen to those words and not think about whatever one's preconceptions are about protest movements or some of the riots that have happened, and just answer the simple question: does the life of a Black person matter? And of course, utterly yes, it does. And we all know that white lives matter. We've all come to that conclusion. We all know that the lives of police officers matter. At least they matter to me. And also, of course, the lives of Black, brown, indigenous, people of color have. The fact that we even have to say that out loud causes me emotional pain. And I want anybody that is a Black, indigenous, or person of color that's listening tonight to know that I care about you from the bottom of my heart, and that the pain that we are suffering through in our country right now because of racial division is profoundly troubling to me. And I want you also to know that although I know I'm a white guy and I can't change that, but what I can do is listen to others and then think about the things that I may be doing right and the things that I may be doing wrong. And if I'm doing things that are wrong, try to correct them and try to find a path of unity and healing in our society. And that is exactly what I will do if I'm elected governor. And I'll do that in both by setting the right tone, but also with specific policy goals, like on things like police reform. That also many of those policies are also good for our law enforcement officers as well, by the way. But also trying to address structural inequality and racism, and things like the access to affordable health care, and also some of our consumer rights opportunities. I mentioned payday loan companies. Payday loan companies disproportionately tend to target racial minorities and suck wealth out of low-income communities. And they're one of the things I've spent my entire career fighting against. So I think I'm going on. You just asked a simple yes/no question, but I can't stop with that. It just feels like there's so much more to say.
Yeah, no, it's a really important topic, which is why I was like, this might be one of the easiest, but so profound for us to all hear that our leaders can publicly say, like, yes, Black Lives Matter, and yes, I'm going to work for them. So for Karina, or Chris, whichever one would like to answer, what's your guys' plan on police reform? So, because you had mentioned that you're interested in advancing police reform, but what kind of plans do you have? What hopes do you have for Utah on that?
Shall I jump in on this one, Karina? Okay. Yes. So first off, I think that I'll give you a number of things that we'd like to do. One, we've talked to both the Police Officers Union as well as some of the Black Lives Matter activists, and also the NAACP and others in the African and Black community about things that they could potentially agree on to find common ground. One thing we were surprised to agree on is that our law enforcement officers have very limited access to ongoing mental health care, even though they have very traumatic jobs from time to time. We talked to a police officer who had to do the crime scene investigation of a murder-suicide with two dead young children. Got 1 day off and then was right back on the job. Our law enforcement officers need grief counseling from time to time. They may need anger management if they're struggling with that. And they have jobs that create enormous emotional strain, and they may need some care in terms of their well-being. And that could be both positive for the police officers and also for the people that they're supposed to be policing, to try to get them there so they're in the right frame of mind to police with an open heart and bright eyes, to care for all people with equal justice under the law. That's step one. Step two, I think that we need to do an audit of the use of force policies for all police departments in the state of Utah, including local city, municipal police departments, sheriff departments, as well as the highway patrol, to make sure that we have all of the conflict de-escalation procedures that are the best state of the art. We have made some progress on that. The state legislature banned chokeholds. That seems like that's a step in the right direction. But we need to make sure that we're de-escalating situations to the greatest extent possible that's consistent with officer safety. Third, we need to engage and make sure that we have a statewide audit and make sure that the same police forces are engaging in sufficient implicit bias training. And look, it's easy to have implicit biases in our society, whether that's along race lines or gender lines. And banks and businesses and universities, I have to go through implicit bias training as a professor at the law school. It's a common practice in society. We're not picking on law enforcement. We just need to make sure that they're, making sure that they're questioning whether or not they're, engaging in implicit biases. That's 3. 4, maybe I should stop here. I don't want to go too long, but if we do have police officers that are excessively violent or are overtly racist, which can happen. I'm not saying that it happens all the time, but there may be some, white supremacists or neo-Nazis that have infiltrated our police forces. They got to go. A job description of being a police officer is equal justice under the law. And somebody that's not committed to that does not meet the basic requirements for being a police officer in the United States of America. And we need to have a statewide database, keep track of whether or not there might be some officers that are going from one department or other when really they just need to find some other line of work. And that last thing I'll mention, we need to make sure we've got community involvement in policing and prosecutorial decisions. So we need to have community advisory boards for all of our different departments across the state to make sure that they can give feedback to law enforcement. And that could be structured in different ways in different localities. What's right for Salt Lake City or West Valley City might not be right for Price or for Hurricane or some of the other places that are more remote and smaller towns. But we do need to have opportunities for the community to be involved in our policing to rebuild trust. And so we can go forward with respect for our law enforcement officers and for their professionalism and also for our police communities.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
In June, we started having Facebook Live conversations with individuals and exploring different issues. And we had several that were along, addressing Black Lives Matter and police reform. One was with Darlene McDonald of the Utah Black Roundtable. And then we were honored to speak with Sheriff Rosie Rivera. She came on with us and we had a great conversation with her. I should also say too, that Lex Scott and I went through FBI Citizens Academy training together in October 2018. So if there's any nasty women of Utah out there that want to go through that, I can share that information on how you can go through that training once they start that up again. But that was a great opportunity. And I know that she has done some work, intensive work over the last several years, meeting with the Salt Lake Police Department regularly and just forming those relationships with us, which is really important.
Great. Yeah. I didn't know that you went through with Lex Scott, so that's really awesome. I don't know if you saw my hand go up. I'm like, oh, me, I want to. So that's awesome. That makes me really happy. The Black Lives Matter Utah chapter is actually really, as you guys must know, is really pivotal to what's happening in Utah and our police reform. And I'm really glad to see that you guys have been active in learning about it. And just like participating in how we can grow our communities that way.
Should I take the next couple of questions?
Yeah.
Okay, continuing along the similar lines, Karina, and you guys, I'm going to address this to you, Karina, and if it feels better for Chris to answer, that's perfect. So Jacqueline within our group asked 2 questions. Where do you stand on gerrymandering? Specifically, what will you do about gerrymandering that minimizes the political power of minority communities, particularly our Native communities?
Well, this is a great question. Voters in Utah, one of the ballot initiatives that was passed was Proposition 4 that addressed gerrymandering, so that there's a redistricting commission that is appointed. And so after the census results are in, the legislative boundaries will be redrawn. And one example of gerrymandering that we saw firsthand is when we went to Moab weeks ago. And they said Moab is split straight down the middle, Main Street. One side is in one district and the other side is in another, to kind of dilute their power there in Moab. So that's disheartening. But I had communicated weeks ago with Rebecca Chavez Hoke, and if you don't mind, I'm going to read some of my notes from her.
Of course.
Because she had said, so the governor will appoint the chair of the redistricting commission, which is made up of 7 members. So that is defined in Proposition 4. But the legislature will get their own redistricting committee. And even though we pass Proposition 4, the legislature gets the final decision. So the commission is advisory, but it's not binding. So the legislative committee is made up of all legislators, and the GOP legislative leadership decides the membership and the chair. So as citizens, as voters, or if Chris and I are elected governor, lieutenant governor, we would be watching that closely, so that process is fair, and that there's a balance of power between the redistricting commission and then the legislative committee. And then when it comes to, you asked about the Native communities. I went with Devin Thorpe, who's running for Congress, down to the Navajo Nation and some members of the Rotary Club, different Rotary clubs from around the state in May, to deliver supplies to the Navajo Nation. And we met with the Rural Utah Project, one of their directors, and learning more about what is going on down there, voter registration. And they're doing some great things with members of the Navajo Nation and getting Google Plus codes. So they get a Google Plus code address on a plaque on their house. So, and that's more accurate than an address. And that has helped with COVID deliveries. That is actually entered into the San Juan County, like into their voter file in the voter registration database. I called the San Juan County clerk and he confirmed that. So of course, making sure that the boundaries are drawn fairly for, you know, members of the Navajo Nation down there or all different parts of Utah would be important.
Thank you. Her second question, Jacqueline's second question is, there are many communities in Utah that speak English as a second language. Is there an effort to represent them, and what are your plans for outreach and communication with these communities?
Well, last week I went and recorded Spanish campaign radio ad. I went on a mission to LDS mission to Guatemala. And my mother's from Finland, so she spoke Finnish sometimes with us. So that a second language is near and dear to my heart, because when my mother came to the United States when she was 19, she had her dictionary. She was learning English in college. So, you know, reaching out to people in their own language, making sure there's material that's, you know, in their own language when it comes to healthcare, so they can make decisions, better decisions when it comes to healthcare, pandemic response, knowing their options for education or different jobs or opportunities would be important too.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Chris, 2 questions for you. LaTanya asked, I'm going to read them all together because you're probably going to wrap it all together. What have each of you done to support minority communities in the past? What do you plan to do for them in the future? If none, will you commit to joining groups like the ACLU, Utah Black Chamber, etc., to start supporting those communities better?
Yeah, so I've spent my entire career engaged in public service and teaching, and many of those activities are focused on trying to make sure people who are economically disadvantaged are taken care of and get a fair shake in our society. And oftentimes that means especially members of ethnic minorities. So just give you a few examples. When I was at when I was working in the Obama administration, I worked on cases that try to make the way that we purchase car loans more fair. It turns out that many car dealerships get a kickback in exchange for convincing their car buyers to agree to loans with higher interest rates than the borrowers qualify for with that same lender. And it turns out that those end up having discriminatory practices because some car dealers get larger kickbacks and they take more money and cause particularly Latino and Latina and African American buyers to pay higher interest rates, even when you control for their credit history. So I worked on lawsuits trying to challenge that and try to get people their money back. I also, write about that. I'm an author of a textbook, a college textbook for law students, and I write a chapter on how to make our financial institutions more fair and avoid discrimination. And I've also spent my career fighting against those payday loan companies that are a particular problem for people, many low to moderate income families that are from ethnic minority backgrounds. So I've spent my career fighting for that. As far as joining the ACLU or the Black Chamber of Commerce. I mean, I've been joining different organizations all my life, trying to pick out the right organizations that give me the best chance to use my skill set and my expertise to move the country forward in a positive way. I'm not sure, the Black Chamber of Commerce is probably not a good fit for me because I'm a white guy and I don't own a business, but I certainly support them and a big fan. ACLU is a great organization, and we've done some similar work as an academic. They had a great study that talked about how debt collection agencies are using the criminal justice system to try to collect debts. I did a similar study that was sort of along those lines with respect to payday loan companies here in the state of Utah. So I'm definitely interested in working with those kind of organizations, and will continue to do so whether I win this election or not. I'm not backing down. I'm not stopping.
That's great to hear. Cassie, are you ready for your next section?
Yes, I am. So we had a couple of constituents express some concerns about LGBTQ plus rights. So specifically, one person, Allison, wrote in. She had struggled with some health, MS, like your mother, and she needed some life-saving care because of her partner's insurance and a bunch of legalities. She ended up having to leave her kids here in Utah and go to California to try to get this treatment. And family wasn't there when she was able to get married and things like that. So it was just a really hard situation overall. So if the Supreme Court overturns the decision of the Supreme Court decision from 2015, what are your plans to do to help minority members in that community to make sure that they still have the rights that they've been granted?
Should I take this one, or should we, Karina, would you like to chime in, or would you like me to take it?
I could take it.
Okay.
So I know that, it's important for all couples, whether heterosexual couples or same-sex couples have the same rights, especially when it comes to legal rights, health insurance, taxes. And so Chris and I have discussed this, and so we're committed to following through with that if the Supreme Court reverses that decision. And we saw with Kitchen versus Herbert in Utah, though it was decided at the U.S. District Court, that the state's ban on same-sex marriage was unconstitutional. So anyway, we're committed to that. So couples have the same rights.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just chime in on this as well. Yeah, I agree, Karina, that 100%. I want any of your listeners or members that are in the LGBTQ plus community to know that I believe in the equal dignity of all adult loving relationships. And it's not my place to judge. And I want you to feel like you're full participants in our society. And I will fight for your right to be recognized and to have the same kind of protections and legal rights as everybody else. So for example, I will, if the Supreme Court of the United States backslides on their jurisprudence with the confirmation of now, I guess if she's been seated, she'll be seated any day now, Justice Amy Coney Barrett. If they backslide on that, I'm going to be fighting at the state level if we win this election to try to make sure that we continue to recognize in the state of Utah the legal right of all people of same-sex couples to marry, and I will fight against any legislation that attempts to take that away. And if I'm elected, if the state legislature tries to do that, they'll have to do it over my veto. I give you that commitment right here and now. And then I will also add too that I think that we had a pretty good law that provided anti-discrimination protections for LGBTQ members of the public in terms of where they live and also their jobs. But there's no reason that we shouldn't expand those anti-discrimination provisions to broader public accommodations, including things like financial services or health insurance. I would also support a family medical leave law that provides medical leave for that's sensitive to same-sex couples and to the particular challenges that LGBTQ plus families have, to try to make sure that they can have opportunities to nurture their families as well. And then last, did you know that in the state of Utah, there's nothing that prevents juries from the courts from discriminating against LGBTQ families from acting on juries? I think that's atrocious, and that should be an illegal form of discrimination. So those are just a handful of some of the reforms that I would support and try to champion if I'm elected. And also, one last thing I do want to mention too, right now in Utah, we have the highest teen suicide rate in America, the highest teen suicide rate in America. And I think that has, in part, it's complicated. There are a lot of things going on there, but I think one part of it is that sometimes LGBTQ kids in this state don't feel included. And I will set a tone of acceptance and love for those kids and try to fight for resources to help identify them when they're having problems and get them the guidance counselors in schools that they need, and also greater parity for mental health treatment with regular health care, regular, normal, non-mental health care, to make sure that families have the resources they need to get counseling for those children. And that's is a very high priority for us. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super helpful. Another one of our group members wanted to know that regardless of what the presidency ends up looking like and doing, what do you two, let's have Karina do this one if she would like. What do you think about transgender people making a career out of military experience?
Well, my husband served in the Air Force, and so I have a little, experience with watching him in his service. But I believe they should be allowed to serve in the military. If they satisfy all the requirements for the mission and for service, they should be allowed to serve. And so appreciate people that want to serve and serve our country and do a good job.
Great, thanks. Heidi, do you want to jump on for the next ones?
Yes. Okay, we're going to switch topics. We're going to move on to COVID-19. The first question is posed to both of you. What do you plan to do about masks and COVID-19 management? Do you support a statewide mandate for masks? Why or why not?
Well, maybe I'll jump on this one if that's all right, Karina. We've been calling for a statewide mask mandate since July. So for many months, we've been calling for this. The state has finally, in the last week and a half, started to catch up with us. There's now about 90% of the state, 90% of the population of the state has a mask requirement. But I think one of the problems is that it's not being enforced well. People don't know if it applies to them unless they go track down and figure out which county it applies to. And there's not much incentive to do so because they're doing it in 2-week increments. And so nobody knows, like by the time you figure it out, it's going to change and people just are fed up and they're not paying attention. We need a simple statewide mask mandate. Everybody has best to wear masks in public when they're not able to social distance until we get the virus under control. And we'll let you know when it gets there. And hopefully it will be soon, but it's not going to be in 2 weeks, that's for sure. But it's not just about masks. We have an 11-point plan that we published recently that calls for turning this virus around through a number of smart steps. One of them is not shutting down the economy. We think that shutting down the state right now is economically, was a catastrophe, and so many people were struggling. Businesses were failing. Parents didn't know what to do with their kids. I'm not calling for that right now, but we do have a bunch of other steps that we think would make a real difference and will save lives and get this situation back under control. So masks, that's step one. Step two is we need to increase the capacity to do testing and simultaneously decrease the wait times that people are facing to no more than 24 hours. Right now, people are waiting 3 days, 4 days, a week to find out whether or not their test is positive or not. Sometimes it's a little bit faster. It depends on where you go. That's too long. People need to know whether or not they can go back to work tomorrow, whether or not their kids can go to school, or whether or not they need to quarantine themselves from their loved ones. They can't wait more than 24 hours. We've got to get 8 months into this virus. That is too long. We've got to get that going. Third, we need to have more. We need to quadruple the number of contact tracers. So when the number of infections start to come back down, we need to track down who's infecting who and figure out how to get people safely quarantined and treated to prevent them from spreading and from having this fire start all over again in different areas of the state. And that includes case management workers and also resources to try to get people safely quarantined so they're not driving themselves around or taking an Uber or jumping on public transportation when they're infectious. We were just in Cedar City to give a speech a little while ago, and I found out that the testing site is on the other side of town from the university, Southern Utah University, and the kids who need to get tested don't have any way to get there. And so they're giving each other rides and infecting each other while they're trying to go get tested. That's not good enough. We need to have systems in place to try to keep people safe and protect them. I know I go on too long with my 9-point plans or whatever. I'm sorry. I care about policies and actually getting things right. I'll just mention a couple more. We've been wasting a bunch of money on policies and technology that doesn't work. We spent over $100 million and still have one of the very worst outbreaks in America and frankly in the entire world right here in Utah. Our hospitals are starting to overflow and we don't have the personnel and the beds and intensive care units to try to take care of the hundreds and hundreds of people who are getting deathly ill, critically ill with this serious disease. So we need to focus the money that we have, the resources, on things that actually work. I'll just give you one example. We are shutting down low-income health clinics in Ogden, Salt Lake City, and Provo over a relatively modest $2.5 million budget shortfall. I see that as extremely penny-wise, pound-foolish, and short-sighted because those are precisely some of the communities that need care right now and need to have a safe, convenient way to figure out whether or not they've got coronavirus. That's going in the wrong direction. Instead, we spent $6 million on a cell phone contact tracing app that doesn't even work and doesn't provide contact tracing, and we're still paying licensing fees, $10,000 every day for this cell phone app that doesn't actually work when technology that we know works, things like N95 respirator masks and low-income health clinics are being pushed to the wayside. It's not that we need to do more. We just need to be smarter about the decisions and the judgments that we're making. That's the kind of leadership that I'm offering. And I commit to you that I will protect, if I'm elected, I will protect your families and our economy and get our businesses back to work faster and smarter.
We appreciate your passion, so please
Thanks.
don't apologize. That actually leads perfectly into the next question. Shannon asked, what plans do you have to support small businesses, especially those struggling to stay open because of COVID-19?
Well, I think that the first thing we've got to do, the things that I already talked about are the first thing, because what's causing so many small businesses to struggle right now is because our economy is repressed. People are not going out and shopping because they don't want to get sick, or they're not going out as often as they normally would. They're not going to restaurants. They're not going to theaters, and that is preventing money from circulating. And many different jobs in complicated ways are not paying as well. And I'm especially worried about our outdoor outdoor industry and the ski season that's coming up. Part of the reason that I called for a statewide mask mandate and many of these reforms back in July was because we needed to get things back under control for school, but frankly for businesses. What's going to happen with the Sundance Film Festival, which injects billions of dollars of resources into our economy every year? The thing that businesses need now more than anything else is to get the virus under control. We're not going to have a healthy economy until we have healthy people. That being said, we also need to continue to try to leverage federal resources and also do what we can to tap rainy day funds to provide additional business assistance. I'm particularly worried about an upcoming glut of rental evictions and home mortgage foreclosures after the new year when the president's eviction moratorium expires. Many landlords right now are not getting paid. There's some small businesses that also we need to care about. And I'm worried that there's going to be a spike in homelessness right in January at the height of the pandemic. And there's not really a plan in place to address it that I can see. Those are the kind of things that we need to start getting realistic about and pushing back on. Last thing I'll mention too, we should also be using rock bottom interest rates right now to issue bonds, to invest in shovel ready infrastructure projects, to inject more economic activity into our economy. I'll mention in particular rural broadband, which is a pressing need in our state. Maine just issued bonds to try to spark funding of rural broadband internet services across their state. Maine is a similar state to us, relatively small population spread out over a large geographically complicated state. That's the kind of thing that we should be doing here in the state of Utah.
Perfect. Karina, the next question is for you. This question is from Christy. Christy has been living in Utah County with a high-risk child during the pandemic, which she describes as frightening. She has experienced times without any information from UCHD and misinformation from state health departments. If you are elected, what steps will you take to address the failures of Utah County Health Department? And I personally will add, not me personally, Christy personally, the unwillingness of police to uphold the law. How will you streamline communications for health and safety, as well as rebuild the trust of constituents and the health department?
Well, my heart goes out to you, Christy, as helping your concern as a parent for your high-risk child. That must be difficult living there in that situation. I just want to give a little background about what's happening in Utah when it comes to public health. The legislature in their special session just recently, within the last several months, voted to reduce the job qualifications for the executive director of the Utah Department of Health. The person that they appointed or they assigned to that job does not have a medical degree or a public health degree. He has like business management kind of training and has been working there for the last several years. So I guess he has some job experience, but he doesn't have that in-depth educational experience. And so to me, that is concerning. I think it's important to ensure that public health and medical professionals are leading at the state level, and there's open communication with the health departments, and that there's an actual plan of what to do. This is reflective also of the lack of nationwide plan that I have observed as well. President Trump got rid of the pandemic response department or cut the funding for that. So I would encourage the congressmen and senators from Utah to insist, and for us as constituents to insist on a more cohesive national plan and a more cohesive statewide plan. In regards to law enforcement enforcing the mask mandate, I had heard from a friend in Utah County that the head law enforcement official there in Utah County said publicly that he would not enforce any kind of a mask mandate. So that is concerning, but I know I've seen it in certain businesses, they don't even allow customers to enter unless they have a mask. But the statewide mask mandate would help with that, so that businesses have more authority to say, we can't serve you, or you can't come in here unless you are wearing a mask. So that would help protect people as well.
Perfect. Thank you for that. This next question is from Victoria. What will each of you do to address the massive racial disparities in COVID-19 related cases and deaths? Karina, do you want to start with that, or whichever?
Sure, I'll start with that. I'm a governing board member for Logan Regional Hospital, and we just had a meeting with Intermountain Healthcare trustees a couple of days ago, just talking about the cases in Utah right now, and over 50% of the cases are in minority populations in Utah, although minority citizens make up about 17% of the population. And so I think ensuring that they have, of course, have access to health care, health insurance, and that's why I was honored to be one of the 5 sponsors of Medicaid to help provide insurance or medical care for, I think over 102,000 Utahns are eligible for Medicaid. So ensuring that residents of Utah know that that is available to them. The marketing budget got cut for Medicaid expansion. So reaching out to different agencies, different organizations, different community leaders in the minority communities, letting them know that Medicaid is available and the criteria and how to apply it would be important. Also ensuring that frontline workers, essential workers have access to PPE. That one example too is the meatpacking plant here next to my home in Hiram, about 5 miles from my home. They had a really bad outbreak at the meatpacking plant, and we had the president of the union that represents those meatpacking plant workers on a Facebook Live with us. And the union is working to protect those workers and working with the company, but sometimes the workers don't know what resources are available to them. And also working with those companies to make sure that there are adequate protections for those workers would be important. So workplace safety and ensuring that people know that Medicaid or other forms of health insurance are available to them, or low-income clinics too. Chris and I were able to tour the Maliha Free Health Clinic in Salt Lake a couple of weeks ago, and that's a free clinic some people don't know about that is available for people that don't have health insurance.
Chris, do you have anything to add, or that's?
It's a great answer. I mean, I've already mentioned the low-income health clinics that are being closed down by the state, and my insistence that we've got to get this virus under control. And I think that the contact tracing resources that we need to try to make sure people can safely quarantine will be especially valuable for people in the low to moderate income communities. One other thing I might mention that, part of the reason that a lot of people believe that our minority communities are being exposed at higher rates is because they may disproportionately be in frontline working roles where they're exposed to the public more frequently. So working in restaurants or in retail and other areas where they're being constantly exposed. I think that we have not done a good enough job distinguishing between different types of protection from different types of masks. Most people are more comfortable in cloth masks. They're a lot more comfortable to wear than some, but N95 respirator masks, especially the NIOSH American certified N95 as opposed to the KN95 masks, they're easier to breathe through, but they tightly filter, and they filter out most of the virus. So they are, especially if they are fitted to your face and form a tight seal, they provide much better protection. So that's the kind of workplace safety that we need across the community. Right now, I'm very proud that we are endorsed by several unions, including the food workers union, and part of the reason that I think that we received their endorsement is because we've been calling for those kinds of protections for frontline workers, and that's going to disproportionately provide protection to our minority communities.
Perfect. Thank you. Cassie, you want to take the next?
Yep. So we're moving on to some of the economic and business questions that we got. So Karina, do you guys currently have plans to bring more economic choices and good jobs that aren't fossil fuel based into places like Carbon County and the Vernal area?
Well, that's a great question. On Friday, we released our rural economic development plan. And when we're done with this, I'll put it in the Facebook Live comments so everyone can read those. But part of the rural economic development plan includes like broadband, so expanding broadband access throughout the state. And of course, making sure that when businesses are relocating to Utah, if they're showing them different places and locations in Utah other than the Wasatch Front that they can relocate to would be important. Teleworking is going to be an amazing way to increase people that live outside of the Wasatch Front and bring revenue to rural Utah. So those would be some of the important things that we would do. And again, I'll put that copy of that rural economic development plan in the chat when we're done.
Perfect, thank you. And then Marilee asks, do you plan to continue work on the Oakland Coal Port and Salt Lake Inland Port? And how do you think that these will affect the environment and the surrounding communities?
Well, the Salt Lake Inland Port, Chris and I have talked about this before, and I've heard Chris describe it in other meetings that it's pretty much here to stay. Although of course, they haven't started construction yet. So we met with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers recently, and they are in talks with the manager for the whole project. And they want to suggest using like green forms of energy and construction when that facility is built. And so I think making it as green as possible would be important. So there's as little of an environmental impact as possible. And when it comes to the Oakland coal port, I am not in favor of the Oakland coal port, and I don't support it at all. And I know Chris doesn't either. It's $53 million that has been used as the figure to give for that, to give to a company that has gone bankrupt.
Yikes.
So the answer is no.
Yeah.
Maybe I could just chime in on the coal port. I don't think that that's a wise use of taxpayer resources, particularly right now when we're closing low-income health clinics and our public schools are drastically underfunded and when we don't have the resources to deal with the public health crisis. But I do believe that the question about Carbon County and Vernal, Price, Utah, they are really struggling because their economy for so long has been based on coal. And I get that. I recognize that. And look, I don't think that coal is going to go away overnight. And I don't think that fracking and oil drilling is going to go away overnight either, because most of us are still driving, fossil fuel based cars. And a lot of our electricity here in Utah and around the world is still fossil fuel based. But, behind that question is one of the big things that we haven't been asked that I think should be at the very top of many people's agenda. Right now, we are facing a global climate catastrophe. It is one of the most important challenges of this generation. And we in the state of Utah have a responsibility to try to transition to cleaner energy sources. The good news in all of that, though, is that it turns out that clean energy companies have become very profitable and that there are a lot of really great jobs that are being created. For years, Exxon was the most valuable energy company in America, the oil giant. That's not true anymore. Now just a couple of weeks ago, a clean energy company that's headquartered in Florida has become the most valuable energy company in America. They focus on fossil fuel, or excuse me, on solar power and wind power. And we have very large, a lot of area in this state that could really be great for more commercial solar power plants. We've already got a few wind power plants. We've got more resources there. But one other I'll mention, we have the third largest untapped geothermal energy reserves in America right here in the state of Utah. And geothermal energy, there are some sites in Carbon County, is my understanding, that have potential for geothermal energy plants where you drill down and you use the Earth's core, the hot temperatures in the Earth's core, to boil water or some other substance and run turbines off of it. It's clean 24-hour energy that's perfectly renewable. And once you get the technology down, it's cheap because you don't have to buy more fuel every time. And so, and we could develop the technology and the companies that spread that across our state and across the world. Those are the kind of jobs we should be fighting for, not letting it happen in Florida, but right here, including in Carbon County. That's the kind of energy development that I wanted to bring to those states, instead of investing in a coal terminal in Oakland. That's really, I mean, look, it's not going to make that big of a difference for people in coal country. And I know that we want it to be otherwise, but I don't think that's actually going to be that cost effective and is really going to help people have that many jobs. So I think we need to be looking to the future and the 21st century and adjusting to the realities that we're facing.
Absolutely. Thank you. I completely agree with that. And you had mentioned that I think you said the Oakland coal plant is not going to be great for our communities. Do you think, I guess Marilee had kind of asked, like, what do you think will be beneficial to having different jobs? What kind of, I guess, can you answer that? I guess you kind of already did.
Yeah, some of it. I mean, I have a lot of ideas about how to improve our economy. One thing that I haven't talked about yet is our education system is going to be a drag on our economy, not tomorrow, but in 10 years and 15 years. You know, right now we have the lowest per pupil funding for our public school system in America, and we have for decades. And look, that's not, I don't want to be too partisan, but that's not the Democrats that did that, okay? Republicans have controlled our government in this state for a long time, and they are not investing in our kids. Part of that's because we have big families, and I've got 3 kids, and I love kids, and I love, you know, it's part of our culture, and I'm not, you know, I don't object to that. And we also, another challenge, we have a lot of our land in the state, about 70, 60, about 2/3 of the state is owned by the federal government, and the federal government doesn't pay taxes, property taxes in the same way that normal, you know, private land does. And so that makes it harder to generate revenue for schools through public, through property taxes, which is how it's funded through many areas of the country. But we do have a lot of revenue in this state. We have a diversified, vibrant economy, whether that's oil and gas that we just talked about, or mining. Our agricultural industry is still strong. We have an outdoor retail and outdoor industry, both all season long. Unlike some communities, they have outdoor, but it's only one time of the year. Not here. We have both the desert and the mountains, which diversifies for us. And we have a great technology sector with world-class IT businesses and a growing and powerful and lucrative banking sector. So we have a lot of revenue in this state. We can fund our public schools. The problem is that we don't have the will and the leadership to get it done. And that's going to hurt our job prospects, not today, but down the road. The other thing is that we have low unemployment in our state, but the problem is that too many of our jobs are just that, they're jobs. They're not careers. They're not careers with benefits and a living wage that you can build a family around and buy a home. And we need to be focusing the Governor's Office of Economic Development on those types of jobs and planning long term. I want to sit down with some of the major industries in our state and redesign some of the curriculums for our high schools, our trade schools, our community colleges, our 2-year colleges, and our universities to make sure that we are coming to terms with the jobs that we are going to need to fill in 5, 10, and 15 years, and we're training to get ready for them. Is that data scientists? Is that biologists? Is that aerospace engineers? We need to figure out what the trajectory of our economy is and plan for that future in a smart and intelligent way with real leadership and teamwork across the state. That's the kind of vision and energy that I want to bring to it. And again, forgive me, I know I go on too long. I get excited about all the great things that we could do for Utah to build our economy and have great jobs for our kids and our grandkids and win the future for our state. That's the kind of work that I want to do for the public service that I want to give back to my state.
Well, if you ask me, you can't talk about it too much. Like, there's so much to be offered for us. Like, we really need to know what's coming up. So don't apologize. We appreciate being able to know as much as we can. So yeah. I think that's the last of mine.
Cassie. That makes me feel a bit better. Thank you.
Plus, I just talk a lot, so I can't judge.
We have a couple more questions. You guys have been super, 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 super generous with your time. So we'll bust these out real quick. The first is from Laura. She said, there is so much corruption happening within our state. The real estate sector's COVID-19 spending and taxes making others rich. Will you halt ongoing corruption and dig into past corruption as well as hold people accountable?
Can I jump on this one? Karina is such a good person. She's so polite. She won't hit as hard as I want to on this one. Because she's just a better person than me. But I agree that we are increasingly have a corruption problem in the state of Utah. I think in part that's because of our one-party system. That can happen in both sides. In Illinois, it's a wonderful state, very democratic, and they are notorious for corruption in that state. What is every other governor seems to end up in prison after their term back in Illinois. I think that that's starting to happen here in Utah because the pathways to power and to government contracts go through backdoor corridors and special interests and back scratching amongst a set of good old boys. Karina and I are political outsiders. I'm a teacher and Karina's an activist up in Cache County. We don't have anybody that we're trying to look out for other than the people of Utah. And so I will not trade my integrity for any special interest for anybody. The last thing that I want to be governor for is to try and have something that corrupt go on. If I find corruption in my administration, I'll track it down, I'll read it out, and I'll send them to prison if I can. That no corruption whatsoever. We need better leadership on that. I'll do everything I can to get Utah on the straight and narrow.
I'd like to add to that too. I had an opinion piece of mine published in the Deseret News several weeks ago about campaign finance reform in Utah. And Utah is one of only several states that allows unlimited campaign contributions from all different sources for statewide offices. And this has had a negative impact on Utah politics. So instead of getting, $500 at a time, some of the candidates are getting $50,000 at a time, $100,000 at a time. And so it's up to us as citizens to find that out. We can look on the campaign disclosure site for the Lieutenant Governor's office and see, and you can print out a report of all their donations from the person, the name, address, and the donation amount. And so there's responsibility on elected officials to act in a matter of integrity, but it's also us as citizens to analyze who are we voting for, who are they getting their money from. So that's why I think this grassroots movement, like you Nasty Women of Utah, is powerful. I've been involved in grassroots movements too, and so I know that it's powerful. And Chris and I, like he said, we're committed to regular Utahns and making sure that decisions are made for the benefit of the whole of Utah, not special interests or large donors.
And I just want to follow up on that. So if we wanted to know more about who's donating and how much, we can find that on a website. Is that what you had said?
Yeah, the Lieutenant Governor's office has a financial disclosure website, and I can put that in the chat too. So you can do a search by any candidate, and from this state to this state, you can search, and it'll print out a report of all of their donors.
Perfect.
And there's also I think there's a website, Open Secrets, and you can search donations that way too. But I'll put those in the chat too.
Thanks.
That's perfect. It's true. It's all of our responsibility to hold our elected officials accountable, right? It's not just the elected officials themselves. They're not likely to do it. Okay, one more question. It's got a couple parts. Marcia asked, she said, Utah's the only state where one party controls all three branches of the state government. The legislature has been running the show for several years and abusing power and wasteful spending. What are your plans to get the legislature back under control? How do you plan to stop budget waste?
Shall I jump in on this one? First off, I think that how are we going to get the legislature under control? Well, first off, teamwork and collegiality, working across party lines. It's not going to be effective to just yell. We'll have to persuade and negotiate and get into the details, be data driven. And then also, frankly, the power of the veto, if we're elected, is an incredibly important power that can force the state legislature to pay a little bit better attention to the threat that their bills may be sent back to them. So those are all the kind of strategies that I plan to use. As far as budget waste, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Utah's done a pretty good job on some things and less so on others. We have consistently had a balanced budget. It's in our Constitution. I'm proud of that. I think that's something that's working well for our state. And I think most Utahns agree about that. I do think one of the areas where we have a challenge, I think we've done a little better job taking a look at the things that we're spending money on. There certainly have been some mistakes, I think, in the COVID response. But as time goes on, the state legislature looks at different budget items and cuts them frequently to keep them under control. What we don't do as good a job at is looking at the various tax exceptions, loopholes, credits, and incentives that are out there that prevent revenue from coming in the doors in the first instance. And so many of the most influential lobbying organizations and special interests, they don't ask for money, they just ask for relief from their taxes. But it's the same for their bottom line, and it's also the same for the government's bottom line. And what we need to be doing is making sure that for every tax loophole or tax incentive, that those reflect our values. That if we look at that ledger, which dollar for dollar, is it more important to take that money and invest it in our kids and our public education system, or is it more important to give a tax incentive for that particular special interest or business? And sometimes the answer may be that tax incentive is very important because it's creating jobs, et cetera. But we need to continue to look at that on an ongoing basis. Every year, as we go to the state legislature, we need to have a tally of how much revenue we are not bringing into the state, and whether or not those incentives and loopholes and expenditures reflect the best possible decisions with respect to the things that the programs that we are underfunding, like our public school system.
Perfect. Okay, we have one last question, but first we want to reiterate how people can support your campaign. What the most meaningful action for them to take in the next week. We've only got 1 week left. You mentioned phone canvassing, text banking, really importantly, positive word of mouth, just communicating with friends and family and having a sincere conversation. And specifically, you can go to petersonforutah.com to fill out the form, and they'll get in touch with you to let you know other specific ways that you can help. In addition to helping distribute signs, we have had some magical people in our group distribute tons of signs. So if anybody is willing to take that on, let the campaign know and they will help you make that happen. So the last question is, Cassie, your question.
Right. I was like, wait, what? So what do you guys each love about Utah? We'll start with Karina, and then Chris, if you can tell us what you love about Utah.
Well, some of my ancestors on my dad's side were some of Utah's earliest pioneers, and I joke sometimes my pioneer ancestors were probably friends with Chris's pioneer ancestors, but that spirit of the pioneers, and we have a lot of modern day pioneers moving to Utah from different states and different countries, starting out a new life. But the pioneer can-do spirit of making something out of nothing. They came here, it's a desert, they made their cities, they created things, they planted, and they had a vision of what they wanted to achieve. And now look where Utah is now. And also I love the spirit of volunteerism in Utah. Utah has one of the highest volunteer rates in the country, which I'm really proud of. If there's a problem, people are willing to help their neighbor. And so that's what I love about Utah. And I also love Utah's natural beauty.
What do I love about Utah? Well, I also love our natural beauty. I mean, our beautiful mountains and deserts and lakes. But I think the thing I'll emphasize is that I love people. I love. I love Republicans. You know, I love our maverick spirit, our entrepreneurialism, our hard work ethic, our sense of families and togetherness, and all the quirks of it. And I also love the growing cosmopolitan diversity of our state. You know, I grew up out in West Valley City, which is I think the most diverse area in the state, or at least it was at the time, and had many friends from lots of different backgrounds, Latino and Latina, and Polynesian, many Tongan and Samoan friends, and East Asian friends, and look, I love human beings. You know, we're such complicated, funny creatures, and we need good leadership to try to help us reach our best potential. And I don't know, am I the best person for that? I wonder. It seems like there ought to be somebody that's better situated for that. But as I look at our leadership in this state in recent years, I feel like we are drifting further and further away from what mainstream ordinary Utahns want. There's no better example than the 3 ballot measures that we passed in the last election. Leveraging our tax dollars for Medicaid expansion, a sensible compromise on medical marijuana for supervised by physicians. Marijuana is a tough issue. Some people want to legalize it entirely. Other people want to continue to see it as a serious crime. But we all came together, and the good people of Utah said, "Here's a compromise. If you have a serious disease and the physician says it will help, well, okay, that's a good compromise." And then last, fair legislative redistricting. And we did all of those things after all the signatures and the debate and the election. Is it cheeky for me, just a teacher and kind of a nerd, to run for governor? It probably is a little bit cheeky, but you know what's even more cheeky? Taking laws passed directly by the direct vote of the people of Utah and overturning them and watering them down and replacing them with something else. Now that is cheeky. And I want to protect your rights to have a voice in this government and to have access to healthcare and a growing, vibrant economy. I want to protect your families and your livelihoods, and I want to protect each and every one of you. That's why I'm in this race. It's because I care about people, and that's what I love about Utah. That's why I ran.
Great. Thank you both so much for that. I think I just want to chime in about why I voted for you two, because I have felt, I have felt so like swayed by your guys's your demeanors. You guys are both very kind and passionate, and I really appreciate that you are a voice that we don't always hear here in Utah, and I think that that's super important for us to have more diversity in our leadership, regardless of party. I have voted for, don't know that I'm necessarily Democrat, but I'm not Republican either. But I've voted all over the board because I think it's really important for us to have differences in our leadership. And I'm really grateful to have seen that you guys appreciate that, and that that's something that you work for, not just because you have an alternate opinion, but also because you seem to be willing to promote those voices. And I'm really, I'm really grateful for that. So that's why I voted for you guys.
Thank you, Cassie.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you both so much for your time. We cannot thank you enough. We know that the group is super excited to hear from you, and we appreciate especially your patience last week. And we're so excited we were able to make this happen. And yeah, we're just really, really, really grateful for your time.
Well, thank you, Heidi and Cassie, and everybody in your Facebook or your organization for mobilizing. One thing you did never ask me about is all the things I want to do to try to deal with the gender wage gap and my support for the Equal Rights Amendment. So maybe next time, if I get elected governor, you'll get to see what we do about that, because I've got a lot of great ideas. That's a big problem in the state too. It's such an honor to be with you, and thank you for giving us a chance to share some of our ideas. So on behalf of our entire campaign, thank you for everything that you're doing to raise awareness and discuss issues and have civic engagement in our society.
Yeah, thank you guys both so much for your time and all the energy you're putting into this race, and we, crossing our fingers for you. And then thanks for letting us know how we can support you. So for everybody watching, don't forget, get your yard signs, sign up to help distribute yard signs, and let's do some phone banking and text banking so we can really help drive home the votes at the end of this week.
Thank you, Heidi and Cassie.
Thank you
guys
so much.
So much.